everyone, and welcome. Good morning to our audience tuning in from the United States, and good afternoon to those joining us from across Europe. It's a pleasure to have you with us today for our virtual public roundtable hosted by Atlantic Council's Europe Center. After the vote, what's next for Kosovo's future? Kosovo has emerged from the parliamentary election held on February 9th, and the results paint a picture of a nation at a political crossroads. Prime Minister Albin Kurti's party, Vetëvendosje, secured roughly 41% of the votes, still the largest share, but with a notable decline from its previous majority. This outcome underscores a shifting political landscape in Kosovo, one that now demands a coalition building, compromise, and strategic maneuvering. So, where does Kosovo go from here? How will the coalition talks take shape? And what are the broader implications for governance, regional stability, and Kosovo's relationship with its Western allies? I'm Ilva Tare, a resident senior fellow, and I'm thrilled to moderate today's conversation as part of our Balkans Forward series. We have an outstanding panel that I'm going to introduce in a bit, who will help us unpack the challenges of forming a stable government, the evolving political dynamics, and what this all means for Kosovo's future, including the critical EU-led dialogue with Serbia. Before we start, let me welcome our guest, Petrit Selimi, former Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome, Petrit. Glad to have you here. Petrit, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
And indeed, happy to be with all of you, very smart people in this room.
Thank you. Donika Emini, political analyst and member of the Balkans in Europe Policy Advisory Group, BEPAG. Thank you, Donika.
Hi, Ilva. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be part of your events.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure too. Agustin Palokaj, joining us from Brussels, is the senior Brussels correspondent for Koha Group and Jutarnji List. Agustin, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And because this is an interactive event, and I would encourage all of our guests online to submit your questions via askac.org. You will see it also as you see it on your screens. Askac.org is your opportunity to ask a question to this distinguished guest that we have today and bring your voices into the conversation as well. Let me get started with the big question, the coalition puzzle. Petrit, with Vetëvendosje falling short of an outright majority, what are the realistic coalition scenarios, if you can break them down for me?
Well, I think initially it's important to say that the way how this election was framed by Prime Minister Kurti himself, and he repeated this numerous times, was that this is a referendum on his governance. He asked in a very explicit manner 500,000 votes, an overall majority, so he can continue govern on his own with the policies that he has put forward. Actually, put very little policies, but with type of attitude that he has expressed in the last period of time. And he offered himself, basically. I mean, there was no program really presented. So in terms of referendum, it's clear the referendum failed. Majority of Kosovars, majority of Albanians even, have voted against Vetëvendosje by a margin of 41-59 in terms of Kosovo. In terms of Albanian vote, a little bit slimmer. So we are now in a situation in which coalition is inevitable. And there are only two scenarios left, three, but two realistic. Mr. Kurti, who has expressed himself very clearly, again, unambiguously. He is even on an election night when the results were declared, he called the rest of opposition leaders as hayvan, which means like a stupid animal, rather unbecoming language, but it didn't really open doors for any coalition creation. So the idea is that he's probably going to try to squeeze in some MPs from the current coalition parties or coalitions, either by splitting AAK and ISMA, a smaller coalition which consists of two parties, or by trying to get MPs, poach the MPs and try to have them flip-flop and vote for the Vetëvendosje government so he can get those additional 3 or 4 MPs he needs for a minimal government and minimal majority of 61 out of 120 MPs.
And the second scenario?
Second scenario is a large coalition government consisting of everybody else in opposition. Theoretically, it would require all of the opposition and minorities, non-Serb minorities, to join, and that would lead us to 63 MPs, a little bit bigger margin in terms of overall majority in the parliament. But that constitutes, a lot of negotiation between very disparate types of parties, a lot of egos bruised. So it'll require a lot of negotiating skills from everybody in opposition. So I think these are the two general directions that we are looking at how the government is going to be created. Of course, theoretically, Vedvendosje can also invite one of the bigger parties, LDK or PDK. PDK is, by results, the biggest opposition party now, to join them in a grand coalition. But there are no signs whatsoever. I see almost zero chance for this to happen currently in this state of play where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Donika, do you agree with the scenarios that Petrit already shared with us?
Oh, yes. I mean, I was, look, the results of 2021, when Kurti got 52% of the votes, was completely unprecedented. And we knew it's not going to be repeated ever again, because we are a multi-party system. In 2021, because of numerous elements around it and the coalition with Vjosa Osmani, both, running on this reformist ticket, got 52%. We knew that that's not going to happen, and it did not. Kurti had that speech in the winning night, and I think he was still counting on diaspora votes. But diaspora votes obviously failed Vedvendosje, because obviously he took quite a lot from a portion from it, but you could see that there was an increase of LDK and PDK in the diaspora vote as well. Yeah. So with these election results, I think we went back to normal. It's chaotic, yes, but it's normal, because this is how we used to be. Kosovo was always governed with coalitions, and that was a healthy democracy. The critical mass always existed. There was always a strong opposition in the parliament, and there was political debate. 4 years of quietness and political stability we enjoyed. There was not much done internally with reforms, unfortunately, although Kurti's party had all cards in their hands. And in terms of foreign policy, we also didn't do much. There is also a scenario which Petri did not mention, because we don't want to think it's a potential scenario, but to form a government is rather easy, because you need only 61. But to the next year, the mandate of the current president is going to end. And that's when the actual crisis will start, because you need 80 people, 80 MPs. And, by sidelining Lista Srpska, and I'm sure that all the Albanian parties will try to avoid as much as possible any potential coalition depending on Lista Srpska, it is going to be very difficult for any of the wings to actually push forward the election of the president. Bear in mind that we are also having local elections. So all political parties are going to calculate very well. So another potential scenario is the Bulgarian scenario, unfortunately, in which you just keep on going without a government. We have a technical government, and internally speaking, we had 6 months. Correct me if I'm wrong, Petrit and Augustin, but we had like 6 months, no government. And then in 2020, 2019, we had like consecutive crises. Internally, we survived because there is bureaucracy that pushes things forward and it works. But I'm not sure if we can afford not having a government in times of, international crisis. We know
turmoil. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
and that's going to be very, very detrimental for Kosovo.
Yeah, Agustin, what's your reading? What are the political parties that may join the forces? Do you see any unexpected alliance there?
First of all, there is no scenario which can produce a stable government, because as Donika mentioned, stable government should have over 80 members in the parliament, because failure to elect the president of the country in Kosovo means early elections immediately. So the coalition that will not have at least 80 will fall next year. That means that no one would want to have a government which will fall in less than a year. If we take the point that Petrit mentioned, that either Vedvendosje against everybody else or everybody else against Vedvendosje, there will be no stable government. There might be margin of 61, so with one vote more than they need, or minimum vote, but that's not called a stable government. So this is the real situation. I agree with Donika that over 50% last time was unprecedented, and I also don't think that anybody ever in a normal circumstances, in a regular situation, will get in Kosovo over 50%. So that was not to be expected. I wanted to say that also, if you compare to what parties were asking for, what they were believing that they will get, everybody is a loser. So when PDK and LDK also said that they will be first, they will win elections, they didn't. So I also see some possibility of split within other parties, not only in the coalition of AAK and NISMA, because there might be people within PDK that want to go to form a government also with Vedvendosje, but this is still unlikely. I live in a country where negotiations to form a government can take up to 2 years. Belgium has a world record in that, but Belgium can afford it because it's a very developed society and a rich country. And I also agree with Donika that Kosovo does not have a luxury this time to wait for too long. I also have to mention the possible scenario, which I would call a Grenell government. So the US envoy comes and tells them, this is your government and take it. So I don't exclude also this possibility, although I don't think that anybody would prefer at this time, because of the relations between Europe and the United States at this moment. Kosovo and the rest of the region will be a victim if there is a different approach towards the region on whatever topics between the United States and the European Union. But I don't exclude.
Have you seen any indication that the US, especially Special Envoy Grenell, may be interested to engage in the coalition forming in Kosovo?
Well, he was engaged before elections, campaigning against Vedvendosje openly with his tweet. He didn't hide his strong feelings towards Prime Minister Kurti. And so I don't exclude, I didn't see indications, but we don't need indications from this US government. Everything can come at any time. So whoever predicts that or pretend to know what the United States will do might be wrong at this moment. So I haven't seen indications now, but it can be in the future. And that's a kind of fear in Brussels as well, because European Union, exactly knowing what is expected from Kosovo, would prefer to have to deal with a strong and stable government. And that's why I'm afraid that Kosovo in those circumstances cannot produce a stable government.
Thank you, Agustin. We will go back to the elections and the forming of the coalition, but I want to ask Petrit on this. Do you see America and the US getting involved in the coalition forming, or even after? There are many scenarios that are being brought back, like the land swap, or a potential scenario where the US somehow gets involved over the Kosovo specialist chambers. We know that Jack Smith was fired once Trump won. So could this signal a shift in the handling of the high-profile cases like Hashim Thaçi is there? Do you see any involvement from the US?
Well, tell the truth, for one, I hope that there is more involvement from US than there was lost for a year under Biden administration. With all due respect and all the great things that President Biden has done in Ukraine, shoring up the support of transatlantic family to support Ukraine, and for other types of policies which may have been effective. In Balkans, to tell the truth, the ball has been dropped. It started already in Obama years, but I can't really say that last 4 years we have seen any consequential action or involvement from Washington, D.C., which has helped the Balkans to close some open chapters. Granted, the willingness was not in Balkans either. But it was clear that Mr. Kurti is not really ready to follow the recipe that was established with the Brussels Agreement a decade ago, with the initial Brussels Agreement. And it's clear that also in Belgrade, Vucic has gone far more belligerent and far more autocratic. But in any case, there was space and there was room, certainly, for a direct involvement, and we have not seen that. So to bring forward today's moment, let's split what is short-term and what is long-term involvement. If you mean, do I see a immediate involvement from Washington, D.C. in alchemic combination of parties and creating of coalitions? I don't really see it. I don't really see it as a necessary either. We are not in crisis yet. We are still in a process of counting and certifying elections. We have to see the final results. Constitutional, Mr. Kurti has the first shot at creating a government. So let's be clear. Currently, all the steps are being followed. Kosovo is not in a political crisis. Kosovo is in an electoral process which is yet to finish. Mr. Kurti will have his chance to produce 61 MPs at minimum. I agree that there is a potential crisis next year, but we'll come to that. We'll cross that bridge when we'll come to that bridge. A lot of things can happen between now and April, May next year when the election of president is happening. And then there is a medium-term involvement from the United States, meaning dialogue. And what do we expect from the U.S. involvement? I have two small points here. I do think that while the attention in Washington, D.C. is obviously on big-ticket items, both internally in terms of Dodge and whatnot is happening out there, but also in terms of Ukraine, most visible of international issues now on the table. I do think that actually probably some people are looking at Balkans, and if they're looking at Balkans, they're looking at Kosovo harder than anywhere else. So I do expect that we are not fully forgotten in terms of what is happening here. But I don't really think or see that any long-term strategic plan is being done to somehow create a new momentum in dialogue. That being said, and I will finish with this, role of Washington, D.C. is absolutely essential in the process. We have seen, unfortunately, that powers to be in Brussels, EU member states, they cannot even agree on canceling the stupid sanctions put by EU to Kosovo. Apparently, Hungary is vetoing those. So with the type of behavior we have seen in Brussels for a number of years now, I fear that actually we do need Washington, D.C. more than ever to ensure that there is progress in Kosovo. As for special court, I've been very vocal about this. This is a political instrument which has now outlived its stated aim. Parliament of Kosovo has voted the court with two-thirds majority because of the horrendous accusations of organ trafficking. None of that has been proven in court. So I do hope that somebody will look at this instrument, which is spending $1 billion to chase founders of KLA, and will take measures to ensure that the justice is swift and is indeed following the truth of the Kosovo war.
Thank you, Petrit. Donika, on this argument, before we go back again to Pristina, I have two questions that are related with the U.S. administration now. First of all, how does the evolving U.S.-Russia dynamic, particularly regarding Ukraine and a potential peace scenario, depending on how that will look, what impact do you think that will have on Kosovo's geopolitical standing? And the other scenario is that the Trump administrations may pursue a more America first approach, let's say, and what will be the implications for Kosovo in that case too? So we have both scenarios to discuss.
Well, I said it before, it is very risky not to have a government and not to have someone you can talk to during this period of time. I mean, obviously, we are not a priority now. There is a lot of issues and there are multiple fronts that the US has opened, but also there is this transatlantic crack. And obviously, we are not even prioritized by the EU. And I'm sure Augustin will talk more about it. But just now from Brussels, they told me, bold of you to assume that you are actually a priority as we are struggling to to sort of focus more on European security and what's going to happen with Ukraine. So yes, there is always the fear of the package deal, potentially. We always fearing how the dynamics will unfold, because obviously Russia has been always backing Serbia in relation to the case of Kosovo. So it is very difficult to predict how the end of that process of the epilogue of the potential negotiations between Russia and the US and Ukraine will have an impact in the Western Balkans as well, because obviously we are another soft spot in Europe, and this is going to be obviously discussed. I agree with Patrick, we weren't a priority either, you know, in the past 4 years either. I mean, there was engagement, there was activity, there was alignment between EU and the US. But honestly, the US just backed the EU, which was dragging feet and had no political will to actually push this issue forward. What we've seen, it was appeasing of Vučić because the geopolitical circumstances created conditions to do so. But absolutely no will was coming either from the region either to solve any of the issues. What we did is that we got inspired by Ukraine, and we thought of, you know, playing stability card will bring us something. And this is not the night anymore, and the instability card was really not so beneficial as we thought, especially in Kosovo. So yes, there is this risk, and the risk is there. The risk is that even the EU will be pushed in a backseat as the facilitator of the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. My argument with Brussels was that, look, you're not even being invited in Russia, Ukraine, and US table. Try to work with what you have on the table, which is Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. If you can deliver in this case, then you can aim for something that is far more complex and far more, you know, actors are involved, even like stronger actors. But apparently they are not focusing on this, and this is quite sad to see. We will be having visits allegedly from Grenell. That's more of a rumor, but Sorensen will be visiting Kosovo, and we will see how we move on from here. What the international community, if we can call it this way, because now it's more fractured, wants in Kosovo, it's a stable and strong government, a government they can talk to, because we cannot talk about lifting EU measures without having tangible results in the dialogue. And if we don't have a government, if we don't have chief negotiator, we will not be able to engage. And honestly, with a political crisis looming on the horizon in May, I think all political parties will sort of calculate on that, and they will not make risky steps when it comes to the dialogue. So this is something that we will all need to have in mind. And I think the political elite in Kosovo is not mature enough to actually read the situation on the ground, because we have both extremes, the compliant side, which is mostly the opposition parties, who, in the name and for the sake of this long-lasting partnership with the West, are you know, try to play as constructive as possible. And then we have the hardcore, the hardline of Kurdi, who disregards the need for alliances and thinks we can make it in this turbulent world alone. And both of these are flawed, and they are short-sighted as strategies in foreign policy.
Thank you, Donika. Agustin, looks like a lot of weight should be carried now by the EU, while Kosovo is sanctioned by the European Commission. Can you please tell us more? What's the dominant narrative about Kosovo right now in Brussels?
Well, there is hope and fear, I would say, because as Petrit and Donika mentioned, how can Europe pretend to lead the free world, what they say, if they cannot open a bridge in Mitrovica for which they paid to be rebuilt? So they cannot pretend to have a significant role at the global stage if they cannot move forward in Kosovo or in Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. But there is a hope that at least there, with a new special representative for dialogue, with a new set in the External Action Service, who are more positive towards Kosovo, more impartial at least, they can move some things. But also, I mean, they don't know whether they wish US engagement or not, because they don't know what that engagement can look like. Previous administration engaged heavily in dialogue, but fully supporting European Union, basically supporting European Union in doing nothing. Because I still dare to say that I don't see agreement between Kosovo and Serbia as something that exists. It was not signed. Serbia is continuously saying that they will not implement all of this. We saw today in Paris, there was a political committee of Assembly of Council of Europe where Serbia pushed to take out of the agenda even inviting Kosovo as a guest in that chamber. And they pretend that this is big victory for Serbia, but this is a violation of Article 4 of that agreement, which stipulates that Serbia will not object membership of Kosovo in any international organization. So I don't know whether it's good to have European approach that leads nowhere, pretending that they want to keep stability and peace by doing nothing. Dialogue is ongoing for 14 years already, or to have some American engagement in a style that we see that to make deals, because if there will be American engagement, it will not be for dialogues, processes, negotiations. It will be to make a deal, like coming and saying Europe has failed in 14 years and we'll fix it in one day. That can happen, and this I'm not sure if which one is worse, to have a never-ending process of dialogue, or to have a clear cut, like do it like this, and that's there is no other solution. When it comes to sanction, I have to recall that it were United States first that initiated the sanctions, and the EU was encouraged, and even Albania at that time had a sanction Kosovo, annulling by canceling the meeting of two governments, and the EU is still keeping. I mean, there is always a debate. Vast majority of EU member states would want those measures to be lifted, especially now where Kosovo doesn't have financial support from USAID. And the sanctions, those measures of EU have gone much beyond what was expected from member states, and the European Commission is manipulating here. But there are some member states, Petrit mentioned Hungary, but I think it's more Italy and France, that want to keep those measures as a kind of leverage towards Kosovo government, hoping that they will do something positive in European eyes in the north, or not prevent something further in case in the north of Kosovo. So I expect those measures maybe to be lifted soon. I mean, but for sure, probably before June. But I don't expect any other moves when it comes to Kosovo process towards membership in EU, because EU have been hesitant on this. It's easy to say that we have to step in to fill the gap that is left by United States everywhere. But if they cannot do this in the region of Western Balkans, I don't see how they can do somewhere else. So this might motivate the European Union to act faster and in a more decisive way.
Very clear on that, Augustin. Without normalization with Serbia, there will be no progress when it comes to EU path for Kosovo. But Petrit, I want
nor for Serbia, because don't forget that in Kosovo, maybe they don't know that Serbia has not moved for almost 4 years.
Yeah, indeed. So now what Augustin said rightly is 14 years of trying to dialogue, but there is no result. And there is this, if I can share it, like a common sentiment, even within the current administration, that the EU has failed with the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue. We discussed the potential scenario of the US getting involved. When it comes to priorities, we don't see it very high up there due to the geopolitical stance. But if US is not interested in the short term, and EU has stalled, the process is totally stalled, and there is this perception of failure, who's going to take care of this problem? Who can jump in?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to be the ones that jump in and actually become proactive players. I've not been in active politics for since 2016 in terms of any party engagement, but I have been observing, and I think I'm not the only one to see that last 4 years, Kosovo's stance, Kosovo's footprint, diplomatic footprint, has severely decreased in Washington, D.C., but also in Brussels and European capitals. And I don't want to be partisan here, but it has coincided with current government that we have. We don't have any more allies in Washington, D.C. That we can proactively start brainstorming and seeing how to get out of this quagmire. And I do think that we have quite endangered our relationship to Brussels, to Paris and Berlin, especially around Council of Europe. What happened today is a very sad story, but it's even sadder when we know that we could have been a member of Council of Europe just a year ago with a very direct request by Berlin and Paris to send what Mr. Kurti has accepted already in Ohrid and Brussels to Constitutional Court for analysis by the Constitutional Court. Again, what was accepted as agreement has not been followed through by anybody in Balkans. So I do think that actually we are, while we are not in an electoral crisis yet, in terms of procedural steps that we have to follow next days and weeks to come to a government, I do think that we are in a deep crisis in terms of Kosovo's ability to interact and ability to lobby and ability to put an agenda out there of how we see the compatible solution of relations with Serbia, compatible to our internal constitutional framework, but also compatible to the expectations of our key allies. So without us actually taking a lead, and again, I repeat, we have not been taking a lead. We have been on the back seat of this one for several years now. We can't really expect Brussels or Paris or Washington to do things for us. So I do think that there are certain agreements, there is a toolkit, and we have to really ensure that we now go in offensive in this issue. Listen, one last point here. Serbian embassy in Washington has 27 people staff. They have 2 lobbying companies. They've been working now for years now to increase their footprint and their messaging in Washington, especially with the new category of politicians coming to Washington, which don't have maybe the memory of the old establishment consensus, nor do they have any sympathy for the old establishment consensus. We have 2 people in our embassy in Washington, 2, not 3, not 5, not 7, and we have no lobbying in Washington. So really, what are we talking about here? Until we are serious in Pristina about what we want to achieve and are brave about it, I think it's a little bit ludicrous to blame and finger point the others over what they have to do for us.
Donika, what's your take on this? And before you start answering, I would like everyone from the audience watching us now, please send your comment, your question, and interact with us at askac.org, as you see it written in the screen, askac.org. I do have a question that is related with this argument that we're doing for you, Donika. More or less, if you can answer it, is by Kyle Scott, former U.S. ambassador to Serbia. Given political uncertainty in Kosovo and Serbia, and somehow combined with the new U.S. administration, do you see any realistic prospects for progress on Kosovo-Serbia? Since we're talking, and it's a topic that we're discussing.
I mean, there are potentially 2 scenarios.
And who can do something at this point?
Oh, yes. I mean, who can do? And I mean, there are two scenarios. There is a dragging feet approach of Brussels. For that, status quo is sufficient for Brussels. As long as there is no conflict on the ground, there is no open fire on the ground, it's good. I mean, that's a success in Brussels, unfortunately. At least this is how they label success when asked about the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. If the issue is securitized, then we will see a completely different scenario, because we unfortunately become relevant for Brussels and for international partners only when there is a security risk, which obviously could have a domino effect across the region and beyond. So when it comes to Brussels, I mean, the entire process has been introduced as a transactional process. Everything is transactional, and that we know. But having a process started in 2011 with the prospect of membership as a carrot, and you do everything to reach that membership. And then obviously, I mean, I don't know, von der Leyen might not agree with this, but I don't see enlargement going anywhere anytime soon because of the EU's capacity to absorb new members. And even if it's a small country, it's so unstable. They have been talking about the reforms so far, so for so long, and not a single member state can actually start a process that is meaningful towards reforming the union. They are struggling with old and new members of the union, and it's going to be very difficult to actually propose something. What the EU does is taking notes, administrative process. They tick boxes. Sometimes they offer money in exchange of some reforms of something happening on the ground, but nothing beyond that. I mean, this is a EU growth plan. What the EU is offering is some sort of economic plan for the Western Balkans, in which this German model of economy brings stability and rule of law and everything. I mean, obviously it has not shown any results in the Balkans. So this brings me to the second scenario, in which you have the US. We're not a priority, obviously. Sometimes we try to overlook the role of Grenell in the region, especially in Kosovo. I had a lot of meetings saying that, okay, what Richard Grenell says, it's actually what the administration stands for. So do not, overlook his role in the region. One might argue that Grenell is not the highest level, and this is not a high-level engagement in the Western Balkans. But, our relevance as a region is equivalent to what we get. Ukraine gets, of course, more higher caliber because of its importance, and we get what we actually are equivalent to. So then there is this potential second scenario in which, obviously, we agree that the EU has done nothing. It has no leverage to push anything towards Kosovo and Serbia. Towards Kosovo, like, come on, they have like 5 non-recognizers, which if you ask someone, they just say, like, talk to them. We cannot do anything from Brussels. And in addition to that, in relation to Kosovo, it's not a problem with non-recognizers anymore, just non-recognizers. There is France and Germany, which, these countries were behind Kosovo in 2020 when the first Trump administration intervened in the dialogue. Now they're not. So it's a different playing field, and this is something that we sometimes don't even see as an important element, unfortunately. So if something comes, this time is going to be under completely different circumstances. And that is a plausible scenario. It just depends how urgent it is and how much of a political capital Washington wants to spend in the Western Balkans. And one last point on Kosovo. It is clear, the message that we got, and this is not my opinion, I mean, this is the message that we got from the EU and the US. It is difficult to talk to Kurti. So I agree on this point with Petrit. It's not going to be easy with Kurti as a Prime Minister of Kosovo, be it with EU member states, EU Brussels, or the US administration, which is something that we expected, of course. The second one is that we don't know what the heck we want from the dialogue. Just yesterday, when I had a meeting, there were like people in the room who still stayed frozen in time. They wanted either UN membership for Kosovo, NATO membership for Kosovo, which is something that Brussels can never deliver. And it won't. It was clear since the beginning that it won't deliver. And there was like a myriad of, Christmas wish list of Kosovo's, wishes, what to achieve through the dialogue. And until we know that, until we know what we exactly want from the dialogue, what is the end goal of the dialogue, what's the time frame, and invest political capital in actually convincing our partners that that's what we want, sitting in Pristina and just waiting for someone to come with a plan that we reject, we then, protest against it, we either agree and then not implement it, is immature, and the world does not have patience to deal with us anymore. And this is something that not only in Kosovo, but also in Serbia, they should know. And lastly, Unfortunately for us, the citizens of Kosovo and Serbia, the political crisis in Serbia, the deadlock in Kosovo after potential deadlock after the elections might not create the ideal circumstances to have proper negotiation plan. But this could be changed if we would go with a shortcut.
Agustin, we come back to you. But in
Yes.
Brussels, looks like with everything happening in the US,
I
there's a lot of
want- I-
attention there.
Yeah, I mean, European Union used to say that we are the most successful in the region when we act together with United States. This have been from early 90s till this year. So they always really acted together. There was one episode of this agreement in Washington between Kosovo and Serbia, which was not the real agreement. It was more some points like to include the opening embassy in Jerusalem that Kosovo did and Serbia didn't, to create even a commission to lobby for the rights of LGBT in 70 countries in the world. But it was not agreement between two countries that would lead to normalization of relations. But still, it was a document with many interesting points. But always they have been acting together, both in Bosnia and in Kosovo, as the most sensitive parts in the Western Balkans. Now, if United States sides with North Korea, Belarus, and Russia in the Security Council, if they threaten Canada and Denmark, how can we pretend that our alliance as Kosovo with United States is eternal and it will never disappear? So we have to be realistic on this, so nobody can know what anybody can expect from this administration in the United States. But to come back to what Donika said, I still think that there are many things that Brussels can deliver, even without having full support of 5 non-recognizers. Like a first step towards preparing an opinion whether Kosovo deserves candidate status or not. Kosovo applied more than 2 years ago. EU can move on that if they want. They can lift the measures if they want. It's true. They say it's difficult. They don't say it's difficult to talk to Kurti. They say it's easy to talk to him, but it's difficult to deal with him. And here also, many people they say that at many occasions Kurti is right, but his approach is wrong. So don't do this now. Don't. You are right, but this is not the time. And to be honest, there are many people who see the point when Kurti insists that Kosovo cannot do a first step in creating an association of a Serb majority municipality, with the promise that once you do this, then we will see what we can do with Serbia. When he accepted it under the conditions that entire package is signed, accepted, and started to be implemented. Then EU can help for membership of Kosovo in the Council of Europe. I agree. I was the one to say that this opportunity should not be missed last year in May, when Kosovo was very near full membership in the Council of Europe. Now we have to regret that Kosovo is not even considered to be as a guest, while we had the chance to be a full member. But the government either calculated that for them non-membership in the Council of Europe is price to pay because the reality on the ground in the north is more important. That might be their calculation, and they are right to do. But I still think that other parties, because those issues in Kosovo are so important that they cannot belong only to the government, but also opposition. I haven't heard anybody in Kosovo apart from Ramush Haradinaj expressing readiness to send the draft of the association to the Constitutional Court, because the others, PDK and LDK, said that this is bad document. I want to come to one point, because I've been covering international relations of Kosovo for years, and the conference for Bosnia, for Croatia, and Rambouillet and everything. Kosovo has a very, very good examples what they get when they say yes to United States. Kosovo was also having ultimatums from United States, from the Democrats, from Madeleine Albright. She came in Rambouillet and told the Kosovo delegation, either you accept this agreement or we forget you. If you accept, then NATO will intervene. Then Kosovo delegation at one point refused, and then they came 2 weeks later to sign it in Paris. Then we had this request, so don't send the mayors in those buildings in the north of Kosovo. The government ignored, and then we got sanctions from United States. It was not in public, it was not in front of the camera, bullying Kosovar delegation, but it was very, very strong messages. It was always transactional in relations with United States, I have to say, whoever was in the government. But this was the way how they worked together. And the big difference was that on this, United States was acting together with European Union and with the United Kingdom.
The EU appointed the Danish Peter Sorensen as a special representative. I don't know if you have had a chance to talk to him. What is he thinking? What is he going to do with the dialogue?
Well, I mean, this is European Union. When you ask him or even Kaja Kallas, who is the new High Representative, they have a typical European approach. Some people say that this format was not good. Then we have to sit during March to see how we proceed further. So he will go to the region soon to prepare the visit of the High Representative, of meeting of High Representative with the leaders. But unfortunately, the process was set in believing that they can deal with people, with persons in power, not with the countries, because Serbia and Kosovo, they will always have government. It's technical government, it's not new government, but it is government. And they can speak on behalf of Kosovo still. The problem is that they wanted, I remember when the dialogue started, they were always saying that with strong Hashim Thaci in Kosovo and strong Boris Tadic in Belgrade, we can do miracles. Then Tadic left, Ivica Dačić came with strong Dačić in Belgrade and strong Thaci in Pristina, we can do deals. So they were trying to do deals with people, not with the country. And this failed because either those people can change their opinion, like Vučić is doing, or they can be replaced with someone else. And I'm afraid to come back to the ambassador's question that I don't expect any progress. I mean, the progress can be achieved in relations of EU with Kosovo and EU with Serbia, but not directly between Kosovo and Serbia. Because Vučić, first, he's those days more nationalist than ever, especially towards Kosovo. And then you have part of the opposition that is protesting against Vučić, protesting also because he betrayed Serbia by accepting agreement with Kosovo. So the atmosphere in Serbia, it's not the one that will that can lead to any move from Serbia in a step of realizing and recognizing the reality and starting to implement the agreement. EU will never give up this agreement. They will always repeat that both sides have to implement it without further delay. And this without further delay, I am hearing and reporting for 14 years, but nothing is moving. So, and plus, don't forget that Germany is yet to form the government. The government in France is not so stable. EU is not so united. So you need big push, and there is no one to push for this.
Yes, and definitely uncertainty is the least we can say in these days. Yeah. I have another question from our audience at askac.org. These are the last minutes. You can still ask, but I have a question that probably Petrit can help me answer. The question is, Matthew Whitaker seems to be Trump's pick for U.S. ambassador to NATO. He has been previously showed in Kosovo, where he showed up in 2019 together with Kadri Veseli. If he is approved by the US Senate, do you believe this will ease Kosovo's access to NATO and maybe even help achieve recognition from the 5 non-EU recognizes? Madrid.
Well, I think at the onset, it's very important to say that regardless of what we see in the big news in terms of Trump administration and its approach in Ukraine, those are not the games that we play in. I mean, with all due respect, Kosovo is a very small country, a very, very, very small country. Our troubles cannot be in any way, shape, or form or we cannot meddle in affairs that we have no horse to play. So let's focus on what is in Kosovo and what is in Washington. I agree with Augustin that dialogue Kosovo-Serbia may not produce results, but what we have to strive is dialogue Pristina-Washington and Pristina-Brussels and Pristina-Berlin and Pristina-Paris, something in which we have failed in the last 4 years. And I do agree that in Washington, D.C., it's not black and white. There are some, it feels sometimes there are some deep structural changes, the fall of neoliberalism, the new right, and sometimes when speaking to some friends in Washington, the discourse is of apocalyptic proportions. But I have been in Washington, I've been in the US after the elections, and indeed there are many people in the new administration which have knowledge of Kosovo, from the new chief of CIA, Mr. Ratcliffe, who has been a very prominent member of Albanian American caucus in Congress, when he was congressman from Texas. Susie Wiles, the chief of staff of Trump, has actually worked as a lobbyist for Kosovo government in past. So there are, and Mr. Whitaker is also has been involved in Kosovo. So there are people there. But what we lack in Kosovo, there are policies and there are tools of how to approach and what to, as Augustin said, what kind of transaction we are entering when we talk about Kosovo's national interest. I do agree with one thing. If we have problems with Serbia in our relations, and if Vučić is a problem, we cannot allow as a country, as a society, for that to be our stumbling block in our development, in our relationship with the West. So far, we have been entrapped. Because Serbia is not doing something, we are not doing something. So this tit-for-tat policy is creating problems for us. But let's split what Belgrade is supposed to do, and we are conditioning Belgrade to do before we do something else. And let's focus what are the expectations in Washington and in our European capitals, and who are the people, and what are the steps that we are to take in Kosovo vis-a-vis the Serbian minority here, vis-a-vis regional cooperation. In regional cooperation, frankly, we've also been very exceptionally poor. We don't even talk to Edi Rama anymore. So I think there's a lot of things that Kosovo can do vis-a-vis Washington with the new people who are in the new establishment, which we are not doing. But I do hope that the moment when the dust settles in Kosovo's elections, some results will be produced and some teams will be created which will be able to a little bit open up the game and maybe open new windows of opportunity. So I'm a little bit of a pessimist in medium to long term, but a little bit of optimism that some things can be done.
Lightning speed question, and I hope the answer too. Donika, do you think the public in Kosovo is ready, or how it will react on a potential land swap scenario coming back from the US administration, if that happens?
I mean, the land swap idea never came from the US administration. It came from within the region. And I think whatever comes from the region will be supported from whoever is trying to sort of not only close the Kosovo-Serbia chapter, but also give some sort of finish to this unfinished project and unfinished state that is Kosovo. I agree with Petrit. Serbia can afford to play tit for tat and can afford to drag feet. We cannot, because we were built on neoliberal ideas. This West that was supporting, backing Kosovo's independence is cracking. The multilateral order, international multilateral order that existed back then, it's cracking. And this can have a detrimental impact on Kosovo. So the public reaction, honestly, like it is split now. Back then, it used to be very hard no. And now, after 4 years of problems and inability to actually give a response to what we want to do with the association, how the association going to look like. We are fearing that, the past 4 years, unfortunately, while we claim that there is sovereignty in the North, we have gradually lost the North. And when I say lost the North, I mean people. It has further contributed to not only land swap, but we could lose
buyer's
it all.
remorse.
Exactly.
Why?
So now I do believe that we have to engage by that. We have to know what we want to do with the dialogue. And then we have to engage, plant the seeds in the member states, in the capitals of the member states, in order to be reflected in Brussels, as Augustine said. And then, of course, engage with DC. Kosovo must stop having this one-sided foreign policy in which we just have a list of requests when we meet our partners. You must do this for Kosovo, you must do that for Kosovo, and Kosovo needs you to do this. We must lead and then ask for help from our allies. And we must take ownership in everything that will happen to this country in the future.
Petrit, you were smiling when Donika was saying that the public is kind of split now on the land swap idea.
No, I think we're having some buyer's remorse here. I mean, it's not secret. I've written about it. I've tweeted. I did think that, however inelegant and brutal the land swap or border demarcation between Serbia and Kosovo, mutually agreed border demarcation was, if what was on the table was UN membership at that time, this was pre-Ukraine, pre-Crimea. If what was on table was recognition of Kosovo by EU5, I thought was it was something that we should have looked at. I think now I don't see that context at all. I really don't think. Now we have other issues and other powers. And even if we go into a land swap, will China accept this? Will Russia accept this? Russia used to say we will not be more Serbs in Serbia. Whatever is accepted in Belgrade will be accepted by us. But now they're different. It's different. It's completely different geostrategic moment. And I do fear that what we're looking now is more of the two Germanism model, something interim that can last for 5 to 10 years. That we don't kill each other, that we can move forward in EU integration, but without actually solving the actual formula, which is a dialogue focused on mutual recognition. That word, mutual recognition, is now slowly disappearing from the discourse of all our allies. And I think we have lost a chance, a golden chance for that 4 or 5 years ago.
Agustin, if you want to jump in.
Yes, I just wanted to jump. I mean, there was never offer for recognition by Serbia and membership in UN. It was more an idea. I mean, also this agreement that was apparently agreed but not signed. First version had the membership in all international organizations, including UN, but UN disappeared somehow. But still, if it says that all international organizations, UN is one of them, so it includes that as well. I agree with Donika that the land swap, or what Petrit is using, demarcation, this is just a word for partition of Kosovo. It's not. It was sold to some member states of EU that agreed with it, thinking that it's just a correction of borders, like border between Belgium and Holland. But when they realize that people live there, and it will be kind of ethnic cleansing almost, then they started to be against. So EU was very, very divided on this. But if it comes back, there will certainly be forces within European Union that will reject that. And as you know, in EU, they act with unanimity still on foreign and security issues and in enlargement. But still, I mean, I expect the support for partition or land swap in Kosovo to grow if the pressure on association is so high and Kosovo rejects fully this any kind of association for Serb majority municipality. We are not in a position to choose what is good, what is not, but I think that association is something that the international community will not give up and will not forget, so they will always insist. But if it is so bad for Kosovo, then the land swap as an idea can come. But in the region and in Europe, instead of closing one problem, which is Kosovo-Serbia relations, it will open many more problems, because many Albanians in Kosovo, if they agree, they will agree assuming that this will mean unification with Albania.
Oh, you opened a different, big topic right at the end of your sentence.
I mean, Kosovo constitution says that Kosovo territory cannot be divided, but Kosovo cannot join other countries. So if it is divided, then Albanians in Kosovo will not agree that, there can
That's
be
a
a
topic for
partition.
another conversation, for another
Exactly.
roundtable, which I'll gladly be happy to moderate. Thank you, Petrit, Donika, Agustin, on behalf of Atlantic Council's Europe Center. I really thank you for your valuable insights in this conversation, as well as our engaged audience. Thank you for your participation and your questions. The dialogue, as we discussed, is stalled. Indeed, doesn't end here. We were trying to actually revive it with this conversation. We encourage you to stay connected, to continue the conversation, and follow our Balkans Forward series as we navigate these challenges and opportunities ahead. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you very much for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.